Hey guys, tonight we step aboard a ship that rocks gently on the wind-dark sea, the kind of sea that Homer used to wax poetic about, though to you it feels more like a rolling bed designed to keep you slightly queasy. The deck beneath your feet creaks, ropes, groan, and gulls squawk overhead with the same annoying persistence as your neighbor's alarm clock that goes off way too early every morning. But you're here, standing in a salty breeze. And you're about to witness one of the stranger little stories from the Greek world, a tale of pirates, mistaken identity, and a god who really knows how to throw a nautical curveball, of course. You probably wouldn't survive long in this world. Pirates are sunburnt, suspicious, and carrying more knives than makes you comfortable. You don't even have sunscreen, well, unless you count the ancient Greek version, which was sometimes a paste of olive oil, and yes, crocodile dung. Let's talk about SPF-EW.so before you get comfortable. Take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, while you're at it, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is for you. Love seeing the little global constellation of bedtime listeners scattered across the world now. Dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. Let's ease into tonight's journey together. Asterisk, the sea stretches endlessly. Not a speck of land in sight. You shuffle closer to the rail of the ship, staring down at water so deep and dark it seems to hide secrets no mortal will ever touch. Somewhere out there, dolphins leap, but here on deck, you're wedged in with a ragged band of men who smell strongly of sweat and saltfish. These are no gentle fishermen. They're pirates, and they're scanning the horizon with greedy eyes, ready to pounce on whatever unlucky traveler they might find. And you, well, you're just along for the ride. You can already tell from the tense chatter around you that they're hoping for something lucrative. Fat merchant's cargo, perhaps. Or better yet, a noble youth they could ransom for gold. Pirates were opportunists. They lived on chance and risk. Historically, the Aegean Sea in antiquity swarmed with such desperate crews, so it's not surprising you found yourself in the company of men who treat theft as an ocean sport. Burly sailor with a scarred cheek jabs a thumb toward the mast and mutters about Zeus blessing their voyage. Another scoffs and says Zeus never bothers with folk like them. It's a common debate. Do the gods care for pirates? Historians still argue whether piracy in the Mediterranean was tolerated as a side effect of weak states or condemned universally. For you, the answer is academic. Either way, you're on a floating den of thieves. The sun beats down the horizon. Ripples. And then movement. The lookout calls, pointing. Another vessel drifts, smaller, with a single figure aboard. The pirate's eyes gleam. Easy pickings? You can almost hear the cash register sound effect, though admittedly that hasn't been invented yet. They close in. The stranger's boat is taken without a fight. And soon enough you see him. A young man, handsome in that effortless way myths always describe. His hair curls dark, his skin gleams like polished bronze, and his expression is oddly serene for someone surrounded by cutthroats. The pirates shove him aboard, grinning at their luck. Surely he's some noble's son, maybe worth a king's ransom. They clap each other on the back, already counting imaginary coins. You, however, feel a twinge of unease. Something about this passenger doesn't match the part of terrified captive. He moves too gracefully. His smile lingers too long. You glance at the horizon again. The water has taken on a peculiar shimmer, like sunlight caught in spilled wine. You blink, rub your eyes, but the effect stays. The pirates don't seem to notice they're too busy arguing about how to divide the ransom. You know better. The Greek gods, after all, were notorious for walking the earth in disguise, slipping among mortals just to test them. And this young man, he radiates that same unsettling energy. It's like someone who's in on a joke you haven't heard yet. You can smell it too, faint, sweet, like crushed grapes left in the sun. Maybe it's just your imagination. Maybe not. The ship rocks, gulls scream, and the pirates jeer, already congratulating themselves. But you sense the story is only beginning. This isn't going to be a tale of easy money. It's going to be one of those nights where the gods themselves climb aboard and teach mortals lessons they won't forget. And you're right in the middle of it, swaying with the deck, trying not to think about how thin the planks are between you and the fathomless deep. You take a deep breath of briny air and wait, because this is only the first stir of something strange. The ship sways, ropes creaking overhead as the pirates shove their new passenger to the center of the deck. You shuffle to the side, leaning against a barrel that smells faintly of fish because, apparently, everything on a pirate ship smells faintly of fish. The young man stands calmly, his wrists loose at his sides, as though he's not surrounded by men who would sell their own grandmothers for a decent haul of silver. You notice how he looks around not in fear, but in amusement. His gaze drifts over the worn timbers, the tattered sails, and the crew with their gap-toothed grins. He's not tense, not defiant. He just seems entertained, as if he wandered into a play and decided to watch how it unfolds. The pirates, of course, interpret his calm as arrogance. It's one of them, a hulking fellow with arms thick as oars, snarls, "You'll fetch a fine price, boy." He jabs a finger in the stranger's chest. The stranger doesn't even flinch. He just smiles, tilting his head the way a cat might when watching a bird. That smile unsettles you. It doesn't belong to a frightened noble. It belongs to someone who knows far more than he's letting on. The helmsman, an older sailor with lines carved into his face like weathered wood, clears his throat. He's the only one not grinning. "Captain," he mutters, "this lad, he isn't what he seems. I've seen eyes like that before. Best we set him ashore." The captain scoffs, waving a dismissive hand. "A fine ransom, and you talk like an old woman spooked by shadows." But you feel it too, that low hum of unease. In Greek tales, mortals always miss the signs, the too-perfect beauty, the casual air in dangerous places, the faint whiff of something sacred. You whisper inwardly, "Don't you idiots know you're about to tick off a god?" A mainstream fact floats into your memory. Pirates really did plague the ancient Mediterranean, so much that cities built entire watchtowers along the coast to spot them. But myths love to twist reality, exaggerating pirates into perfect foils. Greedy, short-sighted, and doomed. You shift your weight, glancing again at the youth. He catches your eye, and for a second, you swear his irises flash with gold. You blink, and it's gone. Maybe the sun's playing tricks, maybe it's not. A sailor pulls out coarse rope and winds it around the stranger's arms. The fibers rasp against skin, knotting tightly, or at least they should. But as the sailor ties, you see the loop slide loose, falling slack like seaweed brushed by waves. He curses, tries again, yanks the knots harder. Still the ropes slip, as though they're greased. The stranger chuckles softly, the sound like bubbling wine. The crew mutters, exchanging uneasy glances. One man crosses himself in an old, half-forgotten gesture of protection. Another spits on the deck for luck. Can't blame them. Ropes that won't bind are bad enough. Ropes that refuse to bind are downright supernatural. You take a breath of salty air, thinking of a quirky tidbit you once heard. Some sailors swore that gods could not be restrained by mortal bindings, not even by iron chains. And here it is, playing out in front of you. Still, the pirates aren't ready to give up. Greed makes them stubborn. "He's enchanted," one growls, "but he'll fetch even more for that. Maybe a prince, or a sorcerer." The helmsman mutters, again, shaking his head. "Mark my words, lads. That's no prince. That's something greater. Best not anger him." Historians still argue whether stories like this were coded warnings for seafaring folk myths layered with advice. Don't mistreat strangers, don't anger the unknown, don't trust too easily in easy profit. You wonder if these pirates, stubborn as they are, would have listened even if the gods themselves dropped a hint. The young man stretches, the ropes falling neatly to the deck. He doesn't move aggressively. He doesn't need to. Its own warning. He smiles wider now, almost mischievously, and murmurs something you don't quite catch. But whatever he says, the air shifts. The gulls fall silent. The ship seems to pause, mid-cree. And you realize with a slow shiver that the real lesson is just beginning. The sun glares off the waves, and for a moment you have to squint. The sea has taken on a curious shimmer, as if someone spilled a jug of watered wine across its surface. The pirates don't notice, or if they do, they chalk it up to heat haze. But you You've been staring at the ocean long enough to know something is off. The young man, the mysterious passenger who refuses to look afraid, leans casually against the mast. He hums under his breath, and you swear the sound blends with the lapping of the waves, turning ordinary water into something hypnotic. A sailor scratches his head, frowning. The sea looks strange today. Another barks a laugh. Strange. You've been drinking too much of that sour barley beer? But the helmsman narrows his eyes, his hands tightening on the tiller. No, he says softly. He's right. The water's shining like poured wine. And when the sea takes that color, it means a god walks nearby. The deck grows quieter. Pirates shift uncomfortably. You notice how even the gulls are circling at a distance now, avoiding the ship as though it carries a sickness. The captain waves off the unease. Gods. Bah. This is nothing but sunlight, you superstitious old fools. Common tension. In Greek story skeptics versus believers, historians still argue whether myths like this reflected actual seafaring omens, or whether poets invented them purely to give their tales more drama. Either way, the pattern is familiar. Ignore the warnings and regret it later. You breathe in deeply, and the air feels different, sweeter, thicker. You imagine the taste of ripe grapes, crushed underfoot in a harvest festival. A quirky tidbit floats to mind. Ancient Greeks sometimes flavored their wine with herbs, spices, or even seawater. Maybe that's why this scent feels so oddly briny and intoxicating all at once. The pirates don't mention the smell, though their faces betray that they sense it too. Their laughter grows forced. One nudges another and mutters about omens. Another spits 3 times over his shoulder. It's a sailor's charm against bad luck. The young man watches them with a small smile, as though he's reading their fear like a scroll. Then he tilts his head back and gazes at the sky. His expression is dreamy, like he sees something far beyond clouds and gulls. You feel it in your bones. This is no ordinary traveler. His presence bends the world around him, twisting it into something rich and strange. The ship rocks more violently, though the wind hasn't changed. The water froths against the hull, bubbling like fermenting must in a wine vat. Pirate stumbles, swearing, and another clutches the railing, eyes wide. Something's wrong. One whispers, "Shut it." The captain snaps, though his voice has lost some of its bite. You look back at the youth. His eyes flicker again, golden in the sunlight. He isn't speaking, not yet, but his silence feels heavier than words. It's the silence of someone waiting for others to realize the punchline of a joke. The helmsman licks his lips nervously. We should have left him. We should have listened. But the rest of the crew is still torn between greed and dread. Like gamblers who suspect the dice are rigged but can't resist one more throw. And you grip the rail, heart slow but steady, lulled by the strange shimmer of the sea. It's hypnotic, like staring at candlelight too long. You're not sure whether you should be terrified or oddly relaxed. After all, when the world starts to unravel around you, sometimes all you can do is lean back and watch. The ship lists gently, wood groaning with each sway. And you can't shake the feeling that you're part of a story older than the planks beneath your feet. The stranger leans against the mast as though it's his personal throne, his smile playing on the edge of mockery. The pirates crowd around him, ropes dangling uselessly from their hands, muttering about enchantments. Finally, the captain jabs a finger at the youth. "Name yourself," he demands, his tone meant to be firm but wobbling around the edges. "Noble house do you hail from? Which prince's ransom shall we collect?" The young man's lips curl into a smirk. He says nothing at first, just lets the silence stretch, the creak of the mast filling the gap. Then he speaks, his voice low, warm, the kind of tone you might hear from a storyteller by firelight. "House," he repeats softly. "I am of no house you could ransom. My family is larger." The pirates snort, trying to laugh off the unease. One mutters that maybe he's just a lunatic. Another says he's drunk on sour wine. But you notice how none of them meet his eyes for long. His gaze is too bright, too sharp, as if it might slice right through their bravado. You feel goosebumps crawl across your arms. The gods in Greek tales love disguises Zeus as a swan, Athena as a shepherd, Hermes as practically anything with a decent cloak. And this one? Every detail points to someone divine, slumming it in mortal clothes. The helmsman shifts uneasily, his voice low. "Captain, he's one of them. Look at him. We've angered a god." The captain barks a laugh, though it sounds more defensive than amused. "A god? On my ship? Bah. If he's divine, let him prove it." You almost clap your hand over your face. Really? You're going to taunt him? It's the kind of overconfidence that makes you want to grab a bag of popcorn. Except you know the consequences will be far less entertaining when you're standing on the same deck. The young man know. "The god you're nearly certain coughs. Prove it," he murmurs. His eyes flick to the ropes at his feet. The fibers twitch, coil, and slither away like frightened snakes. The crew gasps, stepping back. One sailor whispers a half-remembered prayer. Another fumbles with a charm carved from bone, pressing it desperately to his lips. Here's a mainstream fact to ground you for a second. Dionysus, god of wine, madness, and revelry, was often portrayed in myths as gentle until crossed, then terrifying in his wrath. He wasn't all feasts and dancing. He was also about losing control, about what happens when mortals step too far. And here he is, standing before you, disguised in a young man's skin, smiling like he knows exactly how this will end. A quirky tidbit comes to mind. You once read that some cults of Dionysus paraded through towns with ivy and masks, their processions wild enough that locals swore they could hear the god himself laughing among them. Looking at him now, that laughter feels very close. Historians still argue whether Dionysus's myths emerged from real shamanic traditions brought in from Thrace or Phrygia, or whether he was always a purely Greek creation. What they don't argue about is how unsettling his presence was to Greeks themselves. He blurred boundaries between joy and terror, human and animal, sanity and frenzy, and here on this ship, you can feel those boundaries start to fray. The captain tries one last bluff. Bah, tricks of a conjurer. You'll fetch coin all the same. The god tilts his head, amused. Coin? No, you asked for proof. Soon you will drown in it. The words hang in the air, heavy and sweet. You shift uneasily, watching the crew shuffle backward, torn between greed and fear. They wanted a ransom. What they've taken instead is a storm wearing a smile. The ship rocks harder now, as if the sea itself is preparing for the next act. You cling to the railing, bracing yourself. You know, deep down, this lesson is only beginning, and you're about to be dragged right through it. Rope thumps onto the deck in a heavy coil, and you're ordered to haul more from the locker because when the first set of knots melted like seaweed, the pirates decided the obvious solution was more rope. You drag the coarse lines across the planks, your palms catching stray fibers, sticky with old pitch. The smell of tar and salt clings to your skin, and the deckhands move like a practiced machine, one measuring arm-spread lengths, one wetting the strands, one twisting them tight to take the slipperiness out. As if rope itself can be bullied into cooperation. The youth doesn't resist. He only watches, with that same curious amusement, like a cat inspecting yarn that thinks it's in charge. The captain barks orders, "Clove hitch here, reef not there, lash him to the mast," and the crew responds. With the busy confidence of men who believe in technique more than in omens, a mainstream fact slides into place as you watch their hands work. Ancient sailors were connoisseurs of knots.
Long before glossy manuals, they had the muscle memory hitches for posts, maze bends for joining lines, brails for gathering sail. They
learned rope making the hard way too, twisting hemp or flax into cords, then laying cords into lines. Waterproofing with animal fats or pitch. A ship is basically a floating forest of ropes. If you can't tie, you sink. The first mate, who swears his knots have never failed, wraps a clove hitch around the mast and doubles it with a constrictor for good measure. "Let's see him wriggle out of that," he says, giving the line a triumphant yank. You feel the tug vibrate through the wood. For a heartbeat, everything holds. Then the coils soften. It's subtle at first, like rope sighing in warm rain. The turns loosen, the tail slips, and the entire arrangement relaxes, as though embarrassed to be seen working. The first mate blinks, stares at his hands. mutters a word you absolutely cannot repeat on a family-friendly channel. Dry rope, the captain snaps. He slicked the fibers, dry rope, and hard knots. You fetch a sun-brittled coil from a hook near the rail. It crackles when you bend it, the way parchment complains. To deckhands, try a square knot which your grandmother would call tie it neatly. Dear, and then back it with half hitches, then those with more half hitches. Belt and suspenders. And suspenders for the suspenders. It looks like someone tried to knit a sweater around the prisoner. It slips. It's not fast. Not dramatically, no magical sparkles or thunderclaps, just the quiet, humiliating betrayal of friction. The knot rearranges itself into decorative loops, the ends twitching like lazy worms, and then the whole thing gives up, puddling on the deck with a thump that sounds suspiciously like a sigh. The helmsman makes the sign he made before, a little motion of 2 fingers and a whisper to nobody in particular. I told you, he says, voice papery. He's one of them. The captain refuses to concede. Gag him. If he's singing spells, he won't sing them long. A rag is fetched cleanish, by pirate standards, and tied behind the youth's head. The knot looks proud of itself, jutting like a tiny chin. You count 3 breaths. The cloth slides free and lands on the deck like a wilted jellyfish. The youth smiles. Not cruelly, more like he's pleased by a card trick he didn't plan but enjoys anyway. You shift closer, curious, careful. But curious and study the lines of the failed knots. It's not that they're undone. It's that they no longer remember being tied. The memory of tension has leaked away. Quirky tidbit bubbles up in old wedding lore. A knot of Heracles guarded a bride's belt. Only the groom was supposed to untie it. Sailors love that same square knot for its tidy symmetry. Maybe that's why tying the knot followed marriages like a shadow. Today, though, even Heracles would stare at this rigging and shrug. Pin him to the capstan. The first mate growls, stung by the insult to his pride. For men heave. The youth toward the heavy drum and loop lines through the capstan bars, crossing them like lattice work. Someone wedges a belaying pin as a stopper. The arrangement resembles a spider web designed by a committee. The crew steps back, panting. The captain folds his arms with satisfaction. You hear a tiny click the pawl that keeps the capstan from rewinding. Another click, then a little pop, like a cork deciding it would rather be elsewhere. The stopper strolls out of its hole. The bars drift. The web loosens as delicately as a yawn, and the youth straightens, unencumbered. It's less like escaping, and more like gravity changed its mind in his immediate vicinity. A deckhand swears he saw the lines shiver away from the youth's skin, as if the fibers had opinions. Like the rope didn't want to touch him, he whispers. You can't disagree. The touch of divinity, you suspect, is a poor match with hemp. The captain rounds on the helmsman. You're letting the men spook themselves? The helmsman keeps his eyes on the tiller. I'm letting them watch. Harsh sunlight fills the silence. The ship breathes, creak, groan, flap. You press a palm to the mast and feel the thudding heartbeat of wood and wind. The youth lifts his fingers and inspects them with a faint domestic interest, like he might comment on your choice of pitch and twine. If he said, "Have you considered a double fisherman's bend?" it would hardly be stranger than anything else happening. Chain, someone suggests, because there is always one person who believes in metal. The crew doesn't keep much ear and rusts, and a ship prefers things that float, but they dig out a rust fleck length from a chest and clatter it onto the deck. Links ring like dull bells. 2 men wrap the chain around the youth's forearms and clip it with a bronze hook, improvising a shackle that would dent a knee if it fell. It falls not violently. The hook unhooks itself with the soft finality of a decision already made, and the chain puddles at his ankles, heavy and apologetic. Magic. A sailor breathes. Or the opposite of it. You consider another mainstream note while the captain splutters in Greek myth. Dionysus is one of those gods who resist containment. It bursts through stone, masks turn faces strange, bonds unravel. Cult images sometimes showed him with loosened hair and untethered sandals. He was patron of the undoing of the usual. If Athena is the neatly tied bookmark, Dionysus is the page that slips free and becomes a paper plane. The first mate storing. Up decades of stubbornness, makes one last play, an elaborate mariner's hitch that would make a dockmaster nod. He finishes with a flourish, tug tests the line, and steps away as if daring physics to contradict him. The line tries to be brave. It really does. Then, with a gentle settling motion, like a blanket shrugging off a restless sleeper it lies, down around the youth's feet and pretends it was always decorative. A laugh bubbles out of you before you can stop it. It's small, shocked, and probably unwise. But the absurdity has finally tipped from tense to funny, like watching 5 adults attempt to gift trap a cat. 3 jokes crowd your tongue and elbow for space. Maybe try a password lock. Maybe the rope's on strike. Maybe he subscribed to the premium Antonaut package. You keep him to yourself. Mostly, the captain scrubs a hand over his face, smearing sweat and pitch. "What are you?" he asks. Not roaring now, but asking the way a man asks the sea why it doesn't hold still. The youth tilts his head. Kind as a teacher guiding a very confused class. "You asked for proof," he says softly. "You've had it." Historians still argue whether the famous reef not mentioned in ancient sources is exactly the square knot we tie today, or a cousin with a different dressing. The words drift through your brain like notes scribbled in a margin. It doesn't matter. Whatever knot these men know, this passenger unties by existing. A gull wheels overhead and declines to land. The deckhands don't speak. Even the helmsman who saw this coming keeps his counsel. You hear only the quiet rasp of rope fibers inching back into coils, as though the lines prefer sleep over duty. Honestly, same. The captain straightens, pride battling prudence. He looks at the youth, at the rope, at the impossible puddle of chain. Leadership is sometimes knowing when a game is ended. He opens his mouth, closes it, then opens it again. "We may have misjudged," he says, each word like a plank he's careful to test before stepping. You let your fingers drift across a slack coil. It is ordinary rope once more. Rough, sun-warmed, honest. But around your ankles, around his ankles, the air holds the memory of knots that refused their purpose. The lesson changes shape in your mind. Not just don't kidnap strangers, but also don't imagine that what binds others will bind the wild or the divine. Wind shifts. The ship gives a small, anticipatory lean, as if the next act is already walking up the gangplank. You steady yourself, feeling the deck's old heart beat underfoot. And keep your eyes on the youth who doesn't need knots to stay exactly where he chooses to be. The ropes lie limp on the deck. Chains sulk in a pile near the mast, and you're left with the unsettling sweetness that now fills the air. It doesn't smell like tar or saltfish anymore. It smells like the inside of a vineyard at harvest grapes. Split open under bare feet, juice soaking into dust, skin sticking to ankles. You wrinkle your nose because this is not a scent you expect out on the open sea. A pirate nearby sniffs, frowning. "Who spilled the wine?" he mutters. Another laughs nervously. "What wine? We've been out here for weeks. Unless you've been hiding a barrel under your bunk? You smell it too, and it's growing stronger. Sweet and heavy, almost intoxicating. You could swear the boards themselves are seeping fragrance, as if the ship had sprouted a vineyard overnight." You glance down and blink. A green tendril curls from the crack between planks. Another unfurls along the railing, its leaves broad and glossy. Vines, real living vines. Growing where only splinters and nails should be, the stranger your not-so-secret god leans against. The mast, eyes closed as though basking in sunlight no one else feels. A soft smile touches his lips, and you know this is his doing. The pirates at first gape. "At!" Then one swears loudly, ripping at the vines with a dagger. But the moment his blade slices, another tendril curls up, winding around his wrist. He yelps, shaking it off, stumbling backward as if the plant itself bit him. "Gods preserve us," another mutters. You run your fingers over a leaf near the railing. It's cool, waxy, utterly alive. Grapes begin to bud in clusters, swelling. Unnaturally fast, their purple skins glistening. Here's a mainstream fact. Dionysus wasn't just the god of wine. He was also a patron of fertility, a vegetation that grows wild and untamed. Ivy, grapevines, figs, they were all his signatures. Temples dedicated to him sometimes featured carved vines twining around columns, as if the very stone had sprouted. And here, on this creaking pirate ship, you're seeing the myth come alive. A quirky tidbit floats up. Ancient wine wasn't usually drunk straight. It was mixed with water, often heavily and flavored with herbs, honey, or even seawater. Greeks considered drinking unmixed wine barbaric, so the intoxicating richness of these grapes blooming on deck. It feels doubly strange, because it promises a wildness no sober Greek would willingly unleash. One pirate plucks a grape in a fit of bravado and pops it into his mouth. For a moment, his eyes widen in bliss. Then he slumps against the rail, murmuring nonsense, giggling like a child. The others stare at him, horrified. The helmsman shakes his head slowly. It's him, he says almost to himself. It's always been him, Dionysus. Historians still argue whether Dionysian cult rituals were merely symbolic feasts, or if participants actually believed the god was present among them, slipping into their bodies through wine. Watching these vines creep across the planks, you start to think the ancients weren't exaggerating. The captain tries to sound firm, though his voice cracks. It's just sorcery, some conjurer's trick. But the vines don't stop. They weave up the mast, curl along the rigging, coil around the rudder. Grapes swell, burst, drip juice that stains the deck purple. You step carefully, trying not to slip as the wood grows slick with sweetness. The pirates hack and slash, but every cut only births more growth. It's as though the ship itself has been planted, the sea forgotten, transformed into fertile ground. And you're stuck in the middle of it all, breathing air thick with sweetness, feeling your head grow light, wondering how long until the vines swallow everything sails. Deck and men alike. You grip the rail, steady yourself, and glance at the god. His eyes are open now, glowing faintly, watching with quiet amusement. He doesn't need to move. The ship is already his garden. Music arrives before you see its source. It threads itself through the rigging like a curious breeze, thin at first 2 notes, then 3, then widening into a ribbon that loops around the mast and your spine alike. You pause, one hand still, braced on the sticky, grape-slick rail, and tilt your head. It isn't the brassy call of a trumpet or the twang of a lyre. It's reedy, breath-warm, with a gentle pulse like someone's calm heartbeat pressed to your ear. The pirates hear it. 2 rough men who could nap through storms now blink slowly, their eyelids heavy as sails at slack tide. One leans against a coil of rope and smiles at nothing in particular. Another sets his dagger down, on purpose, then forgets why he ever cared about edges. Vine leaves quiver as if they're listening, their veined palms tilted toward the sound. You breathe deeper to catch it. The melody comes in paired strands, one carrying the tune and the other shadowing it a step away. An image clicks. The aloes double pipes each with its own reed. The player's cheeks held by a leather strap called the forbea, so the pressure stays steady. A mainstream fact surfaces, tidy and useful. In ancient Greece, the aloes led choruses. In festivals, including those for Dionysus, and even kept time for rowers. Steady beat could turn dozens of oars into a single animal of wood and water. You hear that steadiness now, except there's no oar beat to match. Only the soft ticking of rope against mast and your own slowing pulse. A deckhand mumbles. No musician aboard, as though the ship keeps a spreadsheet of pipers you can check. The captain opens his mouth to snap a retort, then closes it again, because the reply has drifted away like toast crumbs lost to gulls. The helmsman, stubbornly alert, sets his jaw and tightens his grip on the tiller. Even he sways to the meter. Though a small concession like tapping a foot under the table while insisting you hate the song, you feel the melody run along the planks and up your calves, as gentle as surf on ankles. This is not battle music. It's the sound a meadow would make if it could hum. You picture Pan's hollow reed syrinx, not the aloes now, but cousin to it. A row of pipes bound together with wax and string, tuned to the shepherd's afternoon. Somewhere in the blend, a bird call nests, then flutters off. Leaving sweetness behind, a quirky tidbit slips in wearing sandals. Some Alice players wore that cheek strap so tight it looked like a minimalist muzzle grate for tone. Less great for smiling. If you'd forgotten your ancient crocodile dung sunscreen from earlier, well, the forbea would at least keep your cheeks from burning by sheer coverage. Ancient multitasking. The vines respond first. Their tendrils lift and curl, not reaching for prey, but for rhythm, like green phonographs. Grapes bead with condensation where no cold exists. Each sphere fogged as though it has its own tiny breath.
Ouchies.
Jips a patient metronome down the ribs of the ship. The drops hit in time with the paired notes, and you realize the music isn't just filling the air. It's training the ship to breathe slower. You inhale with it, exhale with it. There you go. Stop that noise, the captain says, but softly. Almost apologetically, like asking a lullaby to respect office hours. He manages to step forward and then pauses with his palm on the mast. As if the wood itself has whispered she. The youth stands where he always stands, in that casual lean. That makes gravity look like a suggestion. His lips don't move, his hands are empty, yet the melody braids tighter, turns once around you, and loosens again. He looks at you as someone might look at a cat deciding whether to nap in a sunbeam. Fond, unsurprised, amused. Music, the helmsman mutters, fighting drowsiness, keeps men steady at the oar. His eyes shine with seawater and stubbornness. This unsteadies differently. You nod because words are unnecessary and, frankly, increasingly ambitious. The sky has softened from knife blue to silk. Even the gull's professional yellers wheel in slower circles, their complaints toned down to contented A. If you had a conch shell to your ear, you suspect it would play this tune back to you like a local radio station, Vineyard Chill. All waves, no ads. 3 hours of pan-flute rain mix. Coming up next, the melody changes key by a hair's breadth, just enough to loosen the knots of your shoulders. You lean into the rail as if it's the armrest of a friendly theater seat. Somewhere behind you, a pirate snores, then corrects himself and pretends he was coughing. Another giggles in that quiet, embarrassed way people do when a memory slips precisely out of reach. The dagger he set down gleams dully, ignored. Like a retired argument, historians still argue whether it was really a piper who paced ancient triremes, or a human caller the keyloosed barking the stroke, while a drummer added thud to breath. You could hold a symposium about it right here, if anyone stayed awake long enough to cite sources. As it is, the only debate on deck involves two drowsy men whispering whether the vines look more like ivy or grape. When your eyes are half closed, scholarly consensus? Yes. The gods' music because there's no pretending otherwise threads under your thoughts and rearranges your furniture. Worries you didn't know you were carrying food, whether that splinter in your thumb. Will fester walk themselves to the door and put a tiny back soon note you don't believe. Even your balance adjusts. The ship's roll feels less like a threat and more like a cradle. You somehow outgrew and now remember perfectly. You notice details you'd missed. The grain of the mast, burnished by 1,000 palms, tiny pitch bubbles in the seams that catch. The light like trapped stars, faint hairline crack in the captain's authority, masked with bravado and now with drowsiness. Music is a key that fits locks you didn't know you had. Another mainstream note drifts up like a seashell, the dithyramb choral. Hymn to Dionysus spun circles of voices around a leader in Athens festivals. It could turn crowds into a single body that laughed, wept, or danced at once. This sensation, a whole ship, breathing one breath feels like that choral unity, only horizontal and damp. If Central Athens had an ocean, perhaps its choruses would have sounded like this at night. City's stones sweating wine scent in moonlight. A pirate near the bow whispers, "Hear the goats?" You hear no goats, but the pipes carry a timbre like distant bleats folded into wind, and for a heartbeat your brain supplies meadows. Time, dust, the saw-flash blink of something horned and curious. The image fades with the next phrase like, "Foam smoothing after the waves curl." The captain rallies, dredging up authority from somewhere near his sandals. "Helmsman," he says, "hold us steady." "I am," the helmsman replies, surprised to find it true. The tiller rests quiet in his hands as if the sea has decided to cancel chop for the evening. Out past the prow, the surface lies glossy. Reflections keep their shape a moment too long, as if the world wants to see itself a little more clearly before it darkens. You glance at the vines again. A tendril brushes your wrist in a gesture that is not a grab, not a warning. It's the plant equivalent to scoot over, there's room. No reason to be rude to botany that grows this fast and smells this nice. 3 small jokes prickle like friendly burrs and stick. 1. That the ship now comes with built-in noise-canceling vines. 2. That your sleep app could never. 3. That somewhere a Spartan hears this and insists on marching in perfect formation to it anyway. Spartans do love a disciplined beat, even if they'd grumble about all the grapes. A cloud slides across the sun. Silver replaces gold. The music thins, not weaker, but finer, as if pulled through a comb. You realize your jaw has unclenched. Your tongue rests quiet against your teeth. Your breath measures itself in even spoons. The world has been tuned. The youth lifts his gaze from the deck to the horizon and lets the last phrase float there. A thread across glittering water. It holds humming like a teacup after a fingertip rings its rim, then vanishes into ordinary air. The pirates wake only a little. It's like people who insist they didn't nap, even as pillow marks print their cheeks. Somewhere among the vines, a leaf claps softly against another leaf, applauding in chlorophyll. You let your eyes half close, because why fight mercy when it arrives in 4 quarters time? The ship is quiet, no shouting, no clatter, only the small business of wood and wind continuing politely. And under it all, you sense a promise in the rested boards. The lesson that began with slipping knots and sweetened air has another verse yet to play. For now, though you rest in the pause between phrases, in the hush that follows music, in the soft span where even danger seems willing to wait until you've finished your breath. The music dwindles into silence, but the ship doesn't stay quiet for long. A new sound prowls at the edges of your hearing low, rumbling, almost a growl. You glance across the deck, expecting to see another pirate's stomach protesting the lack of breakfast. Instead, the vines shudder, the grapes tremble, and something heavy thuds against the planks. You blink. There, at the edge of the mast's shadow, rests a paw the size of a dinner plate. Its fur is striped deep orange and black, and its claws press tiny crescents into the wood. The paw is followed by another, then a muscular shoulder, and then a head crowned with whiskers as long as daggers. A tiger, a tiger. You rub your eyes, because that can't be right. Tigers belong to jungles far east of the Aegean, not to a pirate ship drifting somewhere between islands. Yet here it is, tail swishing, golden eyes gleaming like twin lanterns. The beast pats forward with liquid grace, utterly at home on the shifting deck. The pirates stagger back, their bravado dissolving faster than ice in hot wine. One man yelps and scrambles up the rigging, clinging to the ropes like an oversized barnacle. Another dives headfirst into a barrel, legs kicking comically before he disappears inside. The captain stares, jaw slack. "What sorcery?" he begins, then snaps his mouth shut as the tiger snarls, teeth glinting in the sunlight. The youth Dionysus, you're sure, now simply smiles, watching the chaos unfold as though he's directing a play. He doesn't lift a finger. The tiger is enough. A mainstream fact drifts into your thoughts. Dionysus was sometimes depicted in Greek art riding not horses but exotic animals, leopards, panthers, even tigers, creatures that symbolized his wild, untamable side. His followers, the Maenads, were said to carry thirsty staffs, wrapped in ivy, and dance with beasts at their heels. You edge closer to the rail, careful not to draw the animal's gaze. The tiger inhales, and you feel its breath, warm and musky, ripple across the deck. A quirky tidbit. Ancient Greeks often exaggerated tales of foreign lands, imagining that India was crawling with fabulous monsters and strange beasts. Herodotus, that cheerful collector of oddities, even claimed gold-digging ants lived there. So when Dionysus brings a tiger on board, it's not just terrifying, it's also a wink to the Greeks' half-true geography. The pirates certainly don't appreciate. The academic value? One tries to raise a spear, but the weapon clatters from his trembling hands. Another, braver or stupider than the rest, throws a net. The tiger doesn't even flinch. The net slips off its shoulders as though it were woven from cobwebs. Historians still argue whether the introduction of exotic animals into Dionysian myths came from actual trade routes, sailors bringing tales of beasts, It glimpsed a broadoor from pure poetic imagination. Either way, the effect here is the same. Sheer panic, the beast stretches, its back arching like a bow. The muscles ripple beneath its fur. Then it lowers itself, tail flicking, eyes narrowed. For a heartbeat, you think it might spring instead. It yawns. A vast, jaw-cracking yawn that shows fangs as long as your fingers. The sound rumbles through the ship like thunder in miniature. Pirates whimper. You grip the rail harder, trying not to laugh from sheer nerves. Really, a divine tiger chooses now to take a nap yawn break? The gods do have a sense of timing. The animal pads forward again, brushing past the vines that part politely for its bulk. It circles once around Dionysus, head lowered in feline reverence, then settles at his feet, like a domestic catalbiate, one that could dismantle a man in seconds. Its tail swishes, its ears twitch, its eyes half close in lazy contentment. The message is clear. The god is not alone. He commands not only vines and music, but beasts that have no business being here. The pirates shrink into corners, there. Earlier swagger, reduced to trembling silence. And you. You steady your breath, heart hammering, because while the tiger hasn't looked at you yet, you know the story isn't done. This is only one act in a divine performance. The lesson hasn't. Fully landed, and gods never stop halfway through a play. The tiger settles like a living boulder at the stranger's feet. Tail curling in a lazy question mark, and whatever courage the pirates had left decides to take an early retirement. Panic arrives in waves now. Not those waves yet, just the human kind, messy and loud. A sailor lunges for the rigging and climbs so fast he forgets he hates heights. Another crawls under a coil of rope that previously failed at its job and now masquerades as a fort. Someone whispers a prayer to Poseidon, then, hedging bets, adds, 1-2 Demeter, and tosses in a general to whom it may concern, just in case. You stand a little to the side, palms cupped around the sticky rail for balance, letting the scene blur into that soft focus calm you get when chaos belongs to other people. The vines remember the lullaby from earlier and keep their gentle sway. A cluster of grapes taps your elbow like a friend trying to pass you popcorn at the world's strangest movie. The tiger flicks an ear, is not interested in snacks that grow on vines. The captain, whose authority has taken more blows than the ship's hull, attempts a rally. Hold formation, he shouts, because it sounds like leadership. There is no formation. There is only every man trying to inhabit a different corner of three-dimensional space at once. The helmsman alone stays steady, jaw set, his eyes on water and wind, as if by not looking at the impossible, he might keep the world tilted towards sane. Easy, he murmurs, to no one and to everyone, thumb-stroking the tiller's worn wood. Sails hold, seas fair. A mainstream historical fact steadies you for a breath on Greek ships. The Kybernetes, the helmsman ranked just under the captain, trusted with the vessel's life. Poems and inscriptions alike treat him with respect. Even pirates needed a calm hand at the stern when panic spread like fire on dry hemp. You glance at the helmsman now and see why. In a deck full of flapping nerves, he is ballast. Meanwhile, the crew's bravado melts into pleading. Lord, we meant no offense, one babbles, voice wobbling like a loose belaying pin. We'll put you ashore, anywhere you name. Another kneels. Then remembers kneeling puts him at tiger height, stands, kneels again, flails, settles for a bow so low his forehead kisses the sticky plank. Grapeskin comes away with his hair a small indignity he pretends not to notice. A sailor stumbles toward the god with both hands raised. Fingers splayed in the posture of supplication that Greeks knew as Hekatea, touch the knee, me, touch the chin, and your plea becomes a sacred claim for mercy. He gets as far as the first gesture and freezes when the tiger yawns, reconsidering the choreography. We didn't know, he whispers. We didn't know. The god doesn't answer. He doesn't need to. His silence is full of you should have. Someone tries humor, the last flimsy shield. Perhaps we could offer a gift, he suggests, producing from nowhere a pathetic string of shells, held out like a toddler's art project. You want to applaud the effort? And also hand him a better idea. The shells clink, then drop, then roll traitorously toward the tiger, who watches them as a cat watches dust motes. You catch yourself imagining a helpful modern sign posted by the mast. Rule 1. Don't kidnap strangers. Rule 2. Especially not gods. Rule 3. If you've reached Rule 3, it's already too late. 3 jokes bob up like corks and bump your mind's edge. 1. That the ship should install a customer service desk for divine complaints. 2. That the suggestion box is currently a barrel with someone hiding in it. 3. That HR Homeric regulations will be in touch. You file them away because timing is everything and a tiger is a tough room. A quirky tidbit tugs your sleeve. Many Greek ships had eyes painted on their prows. Stylized pupils to see hazards and ward off evil. You imagine those painted? Eyes peeking back across the deck now, wide as saucers. Watching their crew forget every safety drill in favor of synchronized whimpering. The helmsman's lips twitch. Maybe he's thinking the same thing. Historians still argue whether those apotropaic eyes were purely symbolic, a charm against shipwreck and malice, or whether sailors genuinely believed the bow gained awareness at sea. Either way, the crew today could use every extra pupil in the universe. The captain tries again, voice hoarse. We'll share the profit. Stops, hears himself, and winces like a man who stepped on a rake. No profit, no ransoms. We were wrong. The sentence costs him something salted pride, but prying it out may be the first wise thing he's done all day. The god tilts his head, as if listening for sincerity the way the earlier music listened for breath. The tiger's tail thumps once, soft as a drumbeat. A grape drops beside your sandal and pops, bleeding purple into the cracks of wood. You step sideways and catch the helmsman's eye. He nods minutely. A shared agreement. Keep quiet, keep breathing, keep the ship from inventing new disasters. Somewhere above, a man still clings to the rigging. His voice drifts down, small and squeaky. Captain, permission to remain a terrified ornament? He has granted it implicitly by the laws of common sense. A breeze freshens, riffling vines. Leaves clap again, that polite plant applause. The sweetness in the air deepens until you think you could chew it. You remember the crocodile dung sunscreen joke from earlier and decide that if anyone bottles this deck's aroma, they should not call it Eau de Brigand. Maybe Vineyard at Sea, maybe Hubris Blend. Lord, the kneeling sailor says again, braver for the second repetition, name your wish. We are men, we stole, we erred. The sentence lands like a cleanly struck note. On a less magical afternoon, it might even fix something. Today it hangs. Waiting, another mainstream note anchors the moment. Piracy in the classical Mediterranean wasn't just romantic swashbuckling. It was an economic plague that states struggled to control until later. Crackdowns Romans would make reputations busting pirate havens. For Greeks, the line between merchant and marauder sometimes blurred. The sea offered both livelihoods, and hunger tugged at morals like tide on anchor chain. Watching these men unravel, you understand how flimsy a difference it could be. Your attention slides to details because details are safe. The tiger's whiskers, white as chalk marks. The helmsman's knuckles, walnut brown with callus. The captain's belt, frayed where hands have tugged in anger or fear. The vine's tendrils, curling around a cleat with the affectionate certainty of a houseplant choosing a favorite window. You breathe in, out. The ship answers with its old lullaby of creak and sigh, and the occasional embarrassed cough from the rigging. A sailor you recognize as the loudest earlier every crew has once starts, trembling so hard his teeth click. He tries to swagger and produces a wobble. We're respectable businessmen, he declares, then revises. We are. Men who wish to be respectable, then revises again. We are men. Sometimes honesty finds you by stripping adjectives. To your surprise, the god smiles, not the razor smile from before, but something mild. He walks a step forward. The tiger doesn't move. Instead, the whole deck seems to lean to keep the distance the same, as though the ship itself prefers comfort around him. Mercy belongs to those who recognize a tide and stop rowing against it, the helmsman says quietly, eyes still outward. Not a quote, but it should be. The captain swallows. Then mercy, he says, if you will. He removes the knife from his belt and sets it on the deck beside his bare foot. a gesture naked enough to be a ritual. One by one, weapons clatter down, swords, daggers, a spear that someone probably brought for the aesthetic. The heap looks suddenly small, like a child's costume trunk. You half expect the god to make a speech, along the lines of "be better" or "don't kidnap," something fit for a temple inscription. Instead, he looks up at the sky with the pleased expression of a vintner who knows the harvest will be good. Then back to the men, as if to say, "We are not finished." Panic has softened into pleading, pleading into waiting. The air holds its breath. 3 gentle jokes pad in like house cats and sit. First, that the man in the barrel has reinvented the open plan office's phone booth. Second, that the rigging climber is auditioning to be a figurehead. Third, that your sleep tracker tonight will be baffled heart rate lowered by divine pipes, then spiked by surprise megafauna.
Ow.
Edging down because surrender is finally practical. Historians still argue whether myths like this were performed at sea as cautionary tales for crews, or retold dockside to justify codes of honor among thieves. What endures isn't the enforcement, it's the feeling you have now, a hush, where choice sits like a coin on the table, waiting to be picked up, spent wisely. The tiger's eyes close. The vines lay their leaves flat, content as tidy blankets. The sea goes on being the sea, patient and deep, the oldest audience in the world. You run your thumb along the rail and feel the tacky stain of grape, the faint tremor of men discovering humility, the steadiness of a helmsman who refuses to blink. Panic has done its noisy work. Now comes the part where noise makes room for meaning. The surrender of weapons buys the pirates a breath of quiet, but the god isn't finished. The air grows heavier, not with the stench of fear now, but with the ripe sweetness of the vines. Grapes split on their stems, dripping juice that streaks. The deck in purple rivers. You edge your sandal aside before the sticky flood can glue you in place. The sea laps softly against the hull, but even it feels different. Syrupy, like water that has forgotten how to be water. One pirate leans over the rail and squints. He blinks once, twice, then yelps, stumbling back. "Captain," he croaks, voice barely working. "The sea, it's turned." You lean out carefully, gripping the railing with sticky fingers. He's right. The water isn't blue anymore. It shines deep crimson purple, frothing like a vast vat of fermenting must. The smell confirms it. Heady, intoxicating, unmistakable. The wind-dark sea is no longer metaphor. It's literal. The pirates erupt into fresh panic. One shouts that the ship will sink under the weight of liquid thicker than water. Another insists it's a blessing, that they should scoop it up and drink. A third promptly does just that, leaning over with a cupped hand only to gag and splutter. Coughing red foam down his shirt, the god chuckles, a soft sound that makes the vines quiver. He doesn't need to speak. The message is clear enough. You wanted proof, and here it is. Lapping at the hull, a mainstream fact drifts up from memory. Homer's repeated phrase, "Windark sea oinops pontos," has puzzled scholars for centuries. Some argue it referred to the reddish hue of the Aegean at dawn or dusk. Others that the Greeks had a different color vocabulary entirely. And here, in this myth come to life, the phrase becomes literal, an ocean of Merlot where Poseidon once ruled. A pirate edges forward, fascinated despite himself. He lowers a bucket on a rope and hauls it up brimming with liquid the color of crushed grapes. He sniffs, hesitates, then drinks. A blissful grin spreads across his face before he collapses in a heap, snoring, drunk on the sea itself. Someone mutters. A quirky tidbit springs to mind. In some parts of Greece, winemakers mixed seawater into their vintages deliberately, claiming it gave the wine a sharper, saltier edge. The island of Lesbos, in particular, was famous for it. You imagine those winemakers now, blinking in awe at an entire sea of their preferred recipe? The helmsman doesn't move from his post. His knuckles whiten around the tiller. "Water bears us," he says lowly, "but wine bears none. This ship is a toy now, floating on a god's mood." He's right. The hull lists oddly buoyancy, confused, as though the sea itself has thickened into velvet. How the sails sag for want of true wind. A hush settles again, broken only by the soft splash of waves too sluggish to hurry. Historians still argue whether this transformation in the myth symbolized actual storms and shipwrecks in ancient storytellers dressing up danger and metaphor, whether it reflected ritual experiences in Dionysian cults, where wine and sea were equally symbols of divine surrender. Either way, the sight of an ocean gone purple is unforgettable. The pirates stare, mouths open, their fear now tinged with awe. Some tremble, others gape like children watching fireworks. You feel it too, a bizarre mixture of dread and wonder. The god doesn't simply punish, he transforms the world, making the impossible tangible, undeniable, and yet in the midst of it, you feel a strange calm. Maybe it's the scent in the air, or the faint echo of pipes still humming in your bones. Or maybe it's the simple realization that once the sea itself changes, there's no sense fighting. You lean on the rail, watching the horizon blur in, read in wonder how much stranger this voyage will get before the night is through. The ocean swirls purple under the keel, sloshing thick against the hull like some cosmic fermenting vat. The pirates stand slack-jawed, their earlier panic dulled into stunned silence. You think perhaps they've reached their limit after all. How much stranger can things get once the entire Aegean has become a giant punch bowl? But the god, lounging against the mast with a smirk, clearly thinks otherwise. The first change is subtle. A sailor at the bow scratches his forearm, muttering that the air feels clammy. You glance over and see his skin glisten unnaturally. Sheen spreads, a slick shimmer, as though scales are blooming across his flesh. He stares at his own arm, horrified, then yelps. Stumbling backward, another pirate doubles over with a grunt, clutching his legs. His boots slosh, and you hear the slap of skin softening into fins. Kicks them off, but instead of feet, slick tails writhe free, silver and wet, catching the fading sun. The ship erupts in cries. Men clutch their throats, gasping, only to find themselves gulping the wine sea with ease. Their chests swell and contract like bellows. You see gills opening where skin should be smooth. They thrash, their voices bubbling into nonsense syllables before collapsing into helpless shrieks. You clutch the rail tighter, your own skin crawling. The vines at your side sway gently, as if enjoying the show. The tiger flicks an ear, unbothered. The god tilts his head, watching as if he's orchestrating a performance punishment as theater. A mainstream fact bubbles up in your rattled mind. Dolphins were sacred to Dionysus. Often seen as transformed sailors who learn too late what hubris cost them. In vase paintings, you can see them leaping alongside ships, their curved bodies joyous and free, yet always with the shadow of their human origins. And here before your eyes, that myth materializes. Pirates cry out, their voices breaking into squeals that already sound less human, more shrill. Hands curl into fins, faces elongate, eyes widen and glisten like wet marble. One sailor leaps instinctively over the rail, splashing into the wine sea. He vanishes for a moment, then arcs upward, again not a man anymore, but a sleek dolphin, tails slapping joyously. The others follow, one by one, until the deck clears. Each splash echoes like the drumbeat of divine justice. The water roils with silvered shapes, twisting, leaping, circling the ship in a frenzy. A quirky tidbit slips in, jarring and absurd. Some Greeks believed dolphins carried the souls of the drowned to the afterlife, gentle guides in sleek bodies. Imagine being ferried to eternity by the very men who once threatened you with knives. Poetic irony, gift trapped by a god. Only a handful of pirates remain aboard, trembling on their knees. Their eyes plead silently. Spare us. You recognize them by their hesitation earlier, men who muttered warnings, who doubted the plan. Perhaps their small streak of conscience will matter. The god finally speaks, voice soft yet ringing through the vines and over the sea. Hubris has one end. He gestures lazily toward the dolphins still circling, their leaps almost playful, though you know they remember their terror. They wish to profit by me, now they profit the sea. Historians still argue whether this tale was purely allegorical warning for sailors to treat strangers with reverence, or whether it grew from real rituals where participants donned masks of animals, dancing the thin line between human and beast. Whatever the truth, the myth endures because it's unforgettable. Men turn to dolphins by the god they mocked. You exhale shakily, still gripping the rail. The dolphins leap again, silver against the crimson sea. Some click and whistle as, though laughing in their new forms, the ship feels oddly lighter, as if its burden of arrogance has been flung into the waves. The helmsman remains steady. The tiger purrs like distant thunder, and the god smiles, calm and merciful, though not to all. The deck is quiet now, except for the creak of timbers and the soft drip of grape juice seeping between planks. Most of the crew have leaped into the winddark sea, their sleek new dolphin forms carving silver arcs around the ship. But a few men remain shaking, pale, clutching at their knees like children after a nightmare. Among them stands the helmsman. He hasn't begged, hasn't tried to fight, hasn't even loosened his grip on the tiller. Through vines wrapping the railing and a tiger snoozing by the mast, he has kept the ship's nose steady, eyes fixed on the horizon. His face is carved in patience, though sweat glimmers like tiny pearls at his temples. The god turns his gaze on him at last. A hush falls, well, a deeper hush than before, if you don't count the occasional dolphin squeak from the sea. The remaining pirates shuffle back, unwilling to share his spotlight. You, the god says, voice low but carrying. You alone spoke truth. The helmsman swallows. I warned them, he admits, his tone quiet but firm. Told them you were no mortal. But they mocked me. They mocked you. The god nods once, as though ticking off a ledger. You kept the course when the ship was madness. He steps forward, the tiger rising languidly at his heel. The vines curl away from his path, leaves whispering. Grapes burst as his feet press the deck, staining it deeper purple. He stops before the helmsman. A mainstream fact presses into your mind. Greek stories often show gods sparing a single figure whose honesty or piety set them apart. Even in the harsh justice of myth, mercy glimmered for those who showed foresight or reverence. Hermes rewarded honest shepherds. Athena blessed clever Odysseus. And here, Dionysus stands ready to honor the one sailor who recognized him. The other? Survivors huddle, uncertain if they too might be spared. But you remember the myth clearly. Only the helmsman lives. You shall not share their fate, the god continues, gesturing toward the water where dolphins leap. You will walk the shore again. You will tell their story. Quirky tidbit. Surfaces. In some versions of this tale, the spared helmsman becomes almost a folk saint among sailors, invoked in quiet prayers before voyages. He was seen as proof that gods noticed the honest man even if surrounded by fools. The helmsman bows his head, pressing one hand to the worn wood of the tiller. I will speak it true, he vows. The god's eyes soften, though softness in. His gaze is still like sunlight on a blade. He lifts one hand and brushes it across the helmsman's brow. For a heartbeat, you see a shimmer of ivy leaves, a crown that isn't there. Then it vanishes. The man straightens, breathing more easily than before, as though the weight of fear has slipped from his shoulders. The other pirates, trembling, stretch their hands out. Lord, mercy for us too, they cry. The god regards them with calm detachment. Mercy is not coin you may beg for after theft, he replies. It is a seed planted before the deed you did not plant. And with that, the vines around. Their ankles tighten not cruelly, but firmly guiding them to the rail. One by one, they topple into the wine sea, their shouts cutting short as their bodies ripple warp and vanish into sleek dolphin arcs. Only the helmsman remains beside. You, upright and breathing hard, but alive? He glances at you briefly. And in that look, you share a simple truth. Survival today was not about strength or numbers, but about honesty. Historians still argue whether the sparing of the helmsman reflected actual values of Greek seafaring. Crews, did they truly believe loyalty and foresight could protect them? Or whether it was narrative symmetry, a storyteller's instinct to leave one witness alive to carry the tale. Either way, the myth ensures the helmsman's name lingers in the air. Long after his shipmates are gone, The god turns back to the sea, vines retreating into the planks, tigers settling once more. Steer us onward, he tells the helmsman gently. Your voyage continues. And so it does. The ship rocks gently, the horizon blurring in violet haze where the wind-dark sea meets the sun. Dolphins leap alongside, flashing silver backs and spraying arcs of foam. They squeal and chatter, voices strange, yet oddly joyful, as though the god's punishment has become their playground. You lean on the rail, sticky with grape juice, and feel the air soften at last. The chaos has passed. What remains now is meaning. The god strolls across the deck, bare feet staining the boards in faint purple prints. The tiger slinks behind him, tail swishing lazily. Vines retreat like tide water, curling back into cracks, leaving only a scattering of crushed grapes behind. The air still carries that sweet heaviness, but now it smells less like threat and more like festival. You glance at the helmsman, still steady at his post, has become quieter, more contemplative, as though he knows the story will cling to him forever. You wonder how he'll tell it on shore, how many times he'll repeat the words, how many will believe him. The god raises his hand, gesturing toward the dolphins leaping beyond the railing. Remember this, he says softly. Hubris becomes its own undoing. Those who treat the divine as coin find themselves changed into something lesser, even as they gain freedom in the sea. A mainstream fact steadies your thoughts, Greek. Myths often carried moral lessons woven into their plots, not strict commandments, but warnings. Don't insult strangers because they might be gods in disguise. Don't hoard greedily because wealth attracts divine punishment. Don't imagine yourself above fate because fate always wins. These were the rules ancient audiences heard beneath the stories. Whether they sat by firelight or drifted on decks like yours, the dolphins whistle again, circling, and one leaps higher than the rest, twisting midair before vanishing back into the froth. For a moment, you can almost see his old face, the pirate who once grinned with too many teeth. The image blurs and is gone. A quirky tidbit surfaces. Some Greek fishermen claim dolphins save them from sharks, nudging boats safely toward shore. Imagine, then, the irony of pirates becoming creatures who protect the very seafarers they once threatened. Justice, yes, but oddly merciful too, folding punishment into usefulness, the helmsman murmurs. Mercy and punishment share the same wave. You nod, because it fits. The god smiles faintly. You understand? He lets the silence stretch, the wine sea lapping gently against the hull, the vines swaying in an invisible breeze. The lesson hangs heavy, but not harsh. Even here, after fear and frenzy, the tone is almost gentle, as though the god doesn't punish to destroy, but to remind. Historians still argue whether myths like this were morality tales for sailors, allegories for trade gone wrong, or dramatized rituals of Dionysian cults. Was the god's lesson meant as ethical guidance, religious warning, or simply entertainment? Perhaps all three. You suspect the ambiguity is the point, like the sea itself. The meaning changes depending on who sails it. You breathe slowly, letting the air fill your lungs, sticky with sweetness. The god's eyes gleam faintly, but softer now, less gold and more amber. The tiger yawns, teeth flashing, then curls on the deck as though nothing unusual has happened. The vines sigh into stillness, and you stand in the middle of it all, realizing the story has shifted from spectacle to reflection. You've seen knots slip, vines grow, pipes lull, beasts appear, seas transform, and men become dolphins. Yet somehow the quiet after is the strangest. Part the hush where the moral of the myth waits for you to carry it home. The ship drifts quietly now, sails slack, as if even the wind has paused to let the lesson echo. You lean on the sticky rail and gaze out at the dolphins, their sleek bodies flashing silver against a crimson sea. The god says nothing more, but his silence feels deliberate, an invitation for thought rather than fear. You close your eyes for a moment. And in that lull, your mind wanders to how this tale reached you at all. Stories like this don't stay bottled on one ship. They ripple outward, Some sailor whispers it in a tavern, some poet polishes it with verse, some priest folds it into ritual. The details change, but the spine remains. Pirates take a stranger. He unmasks as Dionysus, and the sea itself becomes theater. A mainstream fact floats into focus. This myth appears in works like Homeric hymns and later in Ovid's Metamorphoses. Each retelling tweaks the details. Sometimes it's a leopard instead of a tiger. Sometimes ivy rather than grapevines. Sometimes the helmsman even gets a name. The variations remind you that myths were not fixed texts but living, shifting traditions, told and retold, until they shaped how whole cultures understood danger, justice, and the gods. The helmsman glances at you, his weathered face thoughtful. People will argue about this, he says softly, as though he too knows the story won't stay confined to your memory. A quirky tidbit: in certain festivals, actors wore masks of dolphins while others dressed as pirates, reenacting this very myth on stage. Imagine the audience: farmers, sailors, merchants laughing nervously as they watched greedy rogues turned into playful sea creatures. They might have recognized themselves a little too well in the bumbling pirates. Historians still argue whether the myth sprang from cult rituals tied to Dionysus, spread through the Mediterranean, or whether it was a seafarer's allegory, blending fear of the unknown with the need to explain sudden storms and shipwrecks. Some even suggest it carried propaganda reminding sailors to honor Dionysus as his worship spread, so they wouldn't fall behind in devotion. You open your eyes again, staring at the horizon. The dolphins leap, their bodies silhouetted against the sinking sun, and for a moment you can't tell whether they're condemned or blessed. Perhaps both. The god turns toward you briefly, his smile small but knowing, as if he's aware you're piecing together the scholarly debates centuries. Later, he doesn't explain, doesn't need to. Myths aren't puzzles to be solved once they're mirrors, shifting with whoever looks. The vines sigh, the tiger flicks its tail, and the helmsman steers through calm waters that shimmer purple and red. The scene feels suspended between time and timelessness, is history and dream, and you realize what matters isn't whether the myth is literal or symbolic, cultic or poetic. What matters is the weight it leaves behind, the way it warns against arrogance, the way it lifts honesty, the way it threads awe into the very air. You take another slow breath, the sweetness lingering on your tongue, and let the thought drift like a leaf on the wind-dark sea. The horizon softens as dusk unfurls itself across the sky. Purples melt into gold, then into the deep indigo of night. The sea's still wine, still impossible, reflects the heavens like a great tilted goblet. Stars beginning to sprinkle themselves. Across its surface, you rest your arms on the rail, sticky with dried grape juice, and feel the breeze cool at last. Carrying the faintest scent of salt beneath the sweetness, the god stands near the mast, vines fading back into wood, the tiger stretched like a drowsy shadow at his feet. The helmsman holds steady at the tiller, gaze fixed outward, body quiet as stone. Around the ship, dolphins leap and chatter, a choir of sleek bodies twisting in arcs that scatter droplets like silver coins. Their whistles rise and fall, eerie, yet strangely comforting, as though they've already embraced their new lives. For a long time, nothing changes, and that stillness itself becomes the final act. You realize the story has no need for thunder or fire. Its ending is this quiet, drift-and exhausted ship floating on a sea transformed, carrying a god, a tiger, one mortal helmsman, and you. Mainstream fact brushes against your thoughts. Myths often close not with a resolution, but with a scene that lingers. Greek audiences didn't demand everything tied up neatly. They wanted the awe to hang in the air, the lesson to ripple beyond the telling. That's why so many tales end at the edge of silence, leaving you to carry the weight forward. The helmsman exhales, breaking the hush. "I'll tell this tale," he says, voice low. "Maybe they'll argue about it. Maybe they'll laugh. But they'll remember." You nod. He's right. Stories like this are sticky as grape juice. They cling, staining minds, refusing to wash out. A quirky tidbit in some coastal villages. Fishermen once poured out a splash of wine before launching their boats, an offering to Dionysus or to the dolphins, said to be his transformed companions. Even now, centuries later, rituals echo faintly in the everyday. Historians still argue whether Dionysus was a foreign god imported from the East or an old Greek deity reshaped by myth. But out here, drifting on waters turned purple by his hand, the debate feels irrelevant. Whatever his origins, he is here, undeniably, power woven with play, punishment braided with mercy. You close your eyes. The ship creaks, the dolphins whistle, and the breeze brushes your hair like a lullaby. The story is ended, but the dream lingers. And now, as night stretches across the sea, you can let yourself drift with it. The god's lesson has been given. The pirates have found their new forms, and only the gentle sound of water against wood remains. Breathe slowly. The danger has passed. The vines no longer creep. They've folded back into silence. The tiger purrs like a distant storm cloud, harmless now. Settled and soft, imagine the ship rocking beneath you, not with fear but with comfort. Slow sway of a cradle, the rhythmic pulse of waves that have forgotten to be wild. The air cools around you, carrying the faint sweetness of grapes, though lighter now, like a memory instead of a feast. Each breath you take is easier, slower, deeper, as though the god himself has left behind a final gift of calm. You picture the dolphins gliding alongside, smooth bodies cutting through dark water, their whistles fading into lullabies. They are free now, no longer pirates, no longer burdened by greed. They are only shapes in the sea, playful, timeless, serene. Their arcs rise and fall, steady as your own breathing above. The stars gather bright and quiet. Two have watched countless voyages and countless myths, shining patiently while mortals tell and retell the same lessons. Tonight they shine for you, steady and sure, distant but constant. Let the weight leave your shoulders now. Let the creak of wood, the hush of waves, the whisper of vines recede into background hum. You are safe. You are carried. Journey is done. So rest, traveler. Rest as the ship drifts across calm waters. Rest as the night folds you in. Rest as the story fades gently into dream. Sweet dreams.